I strongly believe that Jujutsu Kaisen is unfairly criticized, and by the end of this video, maybe you'll agree. I think the perceived over-reliance on action scenes lacks nuance and will be the main complaint I'll focus on. I'll get to character and theme later. What is plot? Literally speaking, is the events that happen in the story. Artistically speaking, plot is problem solving. A character is faced with a problem that prevents them from reaching their goal, so they have to come up with solutions to overcome it. If there are events in a story, but no problems to be solved, is that even a story? I have a more detailed video explaining what goes into writing a plot, but I'll stick with the problem-solving explanation for simplicity. If you look at critically acclaimed stories, one of the biggest compliments outside of the characters and lessons is the problem-solving. In anime, look at Death Note and Code Geass. The way characters solve problems is half of the enjoyment of these stories. For non-anime, look at Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones. Walt outsmarting his opponents, like Walt vs. Gus, and the political and tactical moves made in Westeros, like the late wildfire bombing, are often praised. I believe this praise is well deserved, but I also believe it is not properly given to stories like Jujutsu Kaisen. Stay with me. How do characters solve problems in Jujutsu Kaisen? By fighting. So if problem solving is plot, then in JJK, fighting is plot. JJK has amazing fights. Look at my videos on them. Easily top 5 in creating fights in manga and anime. So if JJK has world-class fights, and the story is made up of mostly fights, doesn't that also mean that JJK has a world-class plot? But no one looks at it this way. Even I didn't. When Code Geass ended with one of the most clever forms of problem-solving in its subgenre, it got praised as genius. When JJK ended with one of the most complex problem-solving penned in action fantasy stories, it didn't get the same response. In fact, people complained, the fight was too long or it was just hype and aura. Why does it feel right to praise the 4D mental chess games between Light and L as great plot writing, but it feels strange to praise the excellent battles in JJK the same way? The biggest counter-argument I developed is that drama problem-solving is stronger because of its natural narrative impact. In Death Note, the results of each solution move the story in different directions and create multiple unique events. If you've seen my plot video, here's a more technical description. In dramas, the result of problem-solving on the 1v1 level changes the approach to problem-solving on the story arc level. Let's look at Rei and Naomi. On the story arc level, L's problem-solving approach was to spy on Light through proxies. On a 1v1 level, Light killed Rei and Naomi. As a result, on the story arc level, L changed his approach to meeting Light in person. As a result, direct 1v1s between Light and L were new possibilities. When L does this, Light changes his approach to joining L's task force. In super simple terms, when Team A wins on the 1v1 level against Team B is forced to change their strategy on the story arc level, thus creating new events and story directions. On the other hand, the result of each fight in JJK just removes combatants from the equation. In Shibuya, Yuji beating the cockroach doesn't change the villain group's approach on the story arc level, or create new events that wouldn't have happened had Yuji not fought the roach. It's just one man down for the curses and on to the next fight. Losing to Chozo and defeating Mahito also don't change the story direction. The fight results like Yuji dying or Gojo being sealed absolutely do change the story direction. The difference is that fights with these kinds of results are less than 10% of the total fights. This is an argument I don't have a perfect counter for. Action stories generally do have less plot impact in the results of their problem solving compared to dramas. Plot impact from results of problem solving is a universally good thing, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect every problem solving event to result in a huge plot impact from action stories, especially when you factor in the significantly larger number of problem solving events and actions compared to dramas. Another potential counter argument I developed was that a fight was the easiest form of problem solving to write, thus making it less impressive. I agree with that. I should have a video going in more detail on this idea titled Why Fights Are Looked Down Upon. The gist was that drama problem solving has certain advantages that are rare or impossible for problem solving in action. In dramas, the problem solving isn't self-contained like a fight. All the solutions are tailor-made for the problem. The range of solutions is wider, and so is the range of goals when solving a problem. However, when it comes to writing fights, Jujutsu is on the highest level of penmanship, and that has to count for something. It overcomes the drawback of fights being easy to some degree. That's my first counter. My second counter is that action problem solving has advantages that drama problem solving doesn't. For example, every character can have an extremely unique problem-solving toolkit that also symbolically represents them. In JJK, Yuji can fight with his fists and low magic, which represents his straightforward and confident personality. Megumi can fight with deep strategies, technical skill, and low power moves, representing his more calm and calculating personality. The range of unique toolkits is much wider, and no two characters solve problems in the same way. Each person has a unique ability or fighting style. Dramas don't have anything close to that. Action stories are also able to have a high quantity of problem-solving events due to the ease of adding in fights to a story, which shows off more plot writing skills. Dramas can't do this easily. Action stories also have an easier time weaving in character arcs, backstories, and thematic development into their problem-solving events. I could keep going, but the point is that dramas and actions both have their own unique advantages when problem-solving. Neither is automatically superior or expected in good storytelling regardless of the genre. Now, characters and themes. I've never seen people pocket watch the quantity and quality of character and theme development the way they do with Jujutsu Kaisen. It doesn't matter if the story has more development than other critically acclaimed stories from different genres. If it's caught slacking in one arc, waves of criticism come in. If you care enough, you can find other critically acclaimed stories slacking off too. They just don't get called out. I like Fullmetal Alchemist, but my grading is also consistent. Scar is a great character with a strong backstory, personality, goals, and character arc. He's probably the pinnacle of character writing in the manga. But JJK has throwaway supporting characters that match Scar's level of writing. Junpei, Chozo, Higuruma, and even Kamo. These aren't main characters, yet they have so much quality poured into them. Don't get me started on Death Note, because the character development is even weaker here. Unfortunately, it seems like the common reaction to JJK's brilliance is indifference, as if this level of writing is to be expected. In fact, when other supporting characters aren't written with this incredibly high standard, it's seen as a flaw in Akutami's writing. Even when characters like Nobara, Nanami, and Mai have moments of incredible writing, if they aren't written like that in every single arc, that's seen as a weakness which is highlighted more than the accomplishment. I don't see other critically acclaimed stories outside of the battle genre held to this level of scrutiny. Even FMA, which is a battle manga, doesn't receive this level of pocket watching. The story can have powerful thematic moments like the Cursed Womb versus Mahito, Hidden Inventory, or even the final Sukuna fight, but instead of focusing on these incredible wins, the moments where the story isn't operating at peak performance are zeroed in on. When a drama has one theme over the course of the entire story, it's praised. When JJK has several thematic ideas, some fully fleshed out, others not so much, the focus is on the incomplete thematic ideas. I don't see as much praise for the amount of attempts at thematic exploration and the amount of successes. On one hand, JJK has less shooting efficiency, but on the other hand, it also scores more goals. It feels like if One Piece isn't writing a tear-jerking backstory about how a citizen got screwed over by the evil tyrant that Luffy will beat every single arc, the writing consensus would be that it's falling off. Attack on Titan is a pretty solid example of the consistency issue going unaddressed. The powerful thematic concept of discrimination is only introduced in the Marley arc, which is like the final quarter of the story. Yet I rarely see criticism for the lack of thematic depth for the rest of the story leading up to that point. It was mostly just a survival apocalypse story, and if there is criticism, it's still allowed to be called a classic. JJK often does not get that pass. Let's talk about setups and payoffs. I dabbled in the community when JJK was in its last arc. Here were the main complaints about setups not being properly paid off. Kenjaku's loss was underwhelming. Hikari vs Urame was mostly off-screen. The merger didn't happen. There was no Heian era flashback. Those are all fair criticisms, but let's look at the setups that were successfully paid off. Gojo and Sukuna had their final fight. Sukuna's long-term plan of stealing Megumi's body bore fruit. Sukuna's Heian form was shown. Sukuna vs Kashimo happened. Higuruma's confiscation and executioner sword were used on Sukuna. Angel's extinguishment was used on Gojo's prison realm and Sukuna. Yuji's brotherly bond with Chozo pays off in him learning blood manipulation. Yuta reveals his domain expansion. Yuta was absent because he was training with Miguel. Now that is paid off with Miguel returning to help out. Yuji's proficiency in Black Flash elevates to mastery. Sukuna's Divine Flame is used and explained. Todo returns to combat after being inactive and uses his technique well. Yuta copies Kenjaku's technique to inhabit Gojo's body. That pays off Yuta defeating Kenjaku, Gojo's death, and the prediction that Yuta would eventually rival Gojo. He does this by literally taking over his body and inheriting the same moveset. Inumaki comes back from retirement and uses his powers well. Yuji's predicted inheritance of Sukuna's shrine is brought to reality. Yuji unlocks his domain. Megumi being inside Sukuna's body allows him to interrupt with shadows. Sukuna's last finger is paid off. Nobara returns from retirement and cleverly uses her powers on the last finger. Yuji defeats Sukuna, which was set up from the first chapter. Some of these payoffs, like Yuji beating Sukuna, are expected from any story. Of course the main hero defeats the main villain. But most of these are insanely creative and unexpected payoffs that show genius problem solving from the characters and the writer. What final battle has this many payoffs in one fight? And which do you think weighs more? JJK's failure to show the merger, Heian era, Urame's fight, and more? Or JJK's unprecedented success in creating some of the most cerebral, inventive problem solving? Shinjuku's showdown, doing a lot of good, doesn't erase the bad, but it definitely outweighs it. That's why it's odd to me when people write this arc off because of its flaws. In order to do that, you have to magnify the short list of flaws and minimize or erase the long list of wins. I could be wrong, but the consensus seems to be that Shinjuku is inferior to Shibuya, and the final fight was too long and complicated. If plot is problem solving, and a major form of problem solving is fight tactics, Shibuya doesn't have a fight near the level of Shinjuku's. Thus, on a 1v1 level, Shinjuku is far superior to Shibuya. Akutami wrote in all of those brilliant plays in problem solving, yet you're focused on what the story didn't do. Only a story like JJK could receive that kind of treatment. I was not able to properly convey all of this in my JJK Let Me Down series, but now I can. Any story can look bad if you put all the flaws under a microscope and hide the strengths in the shadows. That's why I was able to list all of my grievances with the story and still come to the conclusion that it was great. This is not a video about how Jujutsu Kaisen is flawless. It definitely has flaws and I've mentioned them in videos before, but all stories have their own flaws. In the case of JJK, it seems as if discourse magnifies the impact of a flaws and minimizes the several instances of impressive, world-class writing. This same treatment isn't the same for dramas or other critically acclaimed stories. In conclusion, I believe that because fights are looked down upon as a problem-solving method, it feels like Jujutsu Kaisen, and battle manga in general, need to have writing that is 10 times better than other genres to even be looked at the same way. They have to be consistently operating at the highest level possible for the entire story to get the same critical acclaim. The higher standard is unfair to the story and prevents viewers from really soaking in the brilliance of its storytelling. Subscribe for more academic writing content.